Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on the best exercises for joint health and mobility. I'm Ann Friedlander, the Assistant Director of Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and I'll be moderating the session today. And I'm joined by Juliet and Kelly Starrett, and I'll do a more complete introduction in just a moment. But just a couple business items first. We have disabled the chat, so if you want to put in a question, which I hope you do, please put it into the Q&A, and I'll be looking through those during the activity break to bring them back to Kelly and Juliet at the end of the session. One of the things I love about my job here at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine is that we get to experiment with different ways to communicate science to all of you. And so today's webinar is a little bit different than what we normally do. We're going to have a discussion section that's about 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to break for an activity session where Kelly and Juliet will lead you in mobility movement exercises for about 30 minutes, and then we'll come back together with the question and answer period. So lots to do today. Hopefully you'll join us for all three and that you'll participate in the activities. And we'll send a little survey around in the next day or so asking how you like this format to see whether we should do more interactive sessions like this. The other thing I really like about my job is that I get to meet and interact with all sorts of really interesting people, of which Kelly and Juliet are two. And they're part of Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and they've been to some of our on-campus conferences, and they are always audience favorites. So I think you're really going to enjoy this session today. So I'm going to take a moment just to read their bios, and that'll give you a sense of their background, and then we will jump into the discussion section. Kelly is a doctor of physical therapy, movement expert, and three-time New York Times bestselling author dedicated to helping people move better, feel better, and perform at their best. He's the co-founder and chief health officer of the Ready State and co-creator of the Starretts system. Kelly is the author of Built to Move, Becoming a Supple Leopard, Ready to Run, and Desk-Bound. He's worked with elite athletes, military personnel, first responders, and major corporations. Kelly's science-backed methods help everyone build durable, pain-free bodies that thrive in real life. Juliet is an entrepreneur, attorney, author, and podcaster dedicated to helping people move more and feel better. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Ready State, which leads the field in musculoskeletal self-care and recovery. Juliet co-created the Starretts system and co-hosts the Ready State podcast. She's a certified master's nutrition coach, former CEO of San Francisco CrossFit, and co-author of Desk-Bound and the New York Times bestseller Built to Move. A former world champion whitewater paddler, Juliet also practiced law for nearly a decade before dedicating herself full-time to movement, performance, and health. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much for having us, Ann.
So fun.
Do you want to add anything before we jump into the questions about your background?
I always feel like the bio is not fair. I mean, I'm trying to compete with this human being. It's never, there's no parity.
Right. I think you're both very impressive. And I love that you're sitting on the floor. You're modeling, I'm sure, what you're going to talk to us about later. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and we're really excited to be here. And it's such an honor to be involved in Stanford Lifestyle Medicine. So thank you for having us.
Of course. Great to have you. So I read Built to Move, and I loved it, by the way. And in that book, you talk a lot about mobility, more so than exercise and fitness and flexibility and stretching, really. So can you define for us what mobility means and how it differs from those other terms?
What we'll do is, I think we'll take two approaches and we'll try to see if we can put it in terms that matter most to us as humans, and then we'll take another approach.
So I'll start with sort of the way that I think about it as a non-physical therapist. And to me, mobility is the ability to move freely through your environment without pain and to be able to do the things that you want to do with your body. And before I have Kelly do a more technical definition, I'd like everybody, especially because this is a Stanford event and we're in the medicine department. I'd like to everybody think about like the extra wide hallway they have at hospitals. It's like a double wide hallway in most hospitals. And when you're 20, you have that is you. If you think about that in mobility terms, your mobility is like this wide hallway where you can do whatever you want. You can fall and you're not sore, and you can pick up new sports, and you can always say yes to everything because your body is functioning as normal. And as we age, that hallway can start to narrow. And what we lose there is our sort of freedom of choice, our freedom of movement. That can also be a reason why we're in pain. And what we don't want to do is have that hallway narrow so much as we get older that we really can't do the things we love with our own bodies. And what's cool about mobility, if there is something cool about it, is that unlike some of the other features of aging that are difficult to account for, like we all are probably going to lose a little bit of muscle mass and a little bit of bone density, maybe not as much as we once thought, but a little bit of it. If you keep an eye on your mobility, you actually can retain that for most of your life, and you can get it back if you've lost it. And I'll let Kelly go a little more technical on it. On what he would add.
I think it's a great framework, because the whole point is not to become hyper fixated on sort of all of the range of motions that all the clinicians on this call have had to learn. We always want to put it into context of what's meaningful for you. How can you occupy your role in your family? How can you occupy your role in society? How do you occupy your role? Can you go, how does this allow you to express yourself as a human being in this complex psychosocial environment? When we first started really thinking about and looking at position as a root aspect of performance, and really that was what our IP was and sort of what really started us on this pathway, what we saw is that people didn't have clear definitions of what normative range was. And yes, you could say, how much should the hip flex? How much should I be able to bring my knee to my chest? But really that was never expressed in the language of movement. And one of the things that we tried to do is say, could we take these normative ranges? And I'll give you an example, just sitting here, is I should be able to have my feet all the way on the ground, feet straight, and I'm just squatting on the ground, just like millions and billions of people do around the world, just to wait for the bus stop or cook by the fire or get up and down off the ground. But that actually is a exercise that many of us can recognize as part of a feature of the gym. That might be a pistol, that might be a deep squat, right? That might be stepping up and down off a box. And so what we realized is that we didn't have really good, clear movement definitions of what mobility was. So from a technical framework, we could say, hey, do you have access to your normative range? And can you control that normative range? What we found was that if pain was the only reason that people became curious about their range of motion, then that was so far sort of removed from conversations about performance and function, things that matter to you. If all of a sudden your wattage is going down on your bike, or it's harder to throw your leg over the saddle, I know you know what I'm talking about, then all of a sudden, you might not think, hey, this is something that's changing in my body, and I don't have an understanding of that. I'll just wait until it's so bad that I'll go see a physical therapist or a physician. And even then, the conversation about what my body should be able to do was really absent from this idea of health. So what we ultimately can wrap our heads around are, do I have access to my normative range? And when I improve that range, do I restore and improve function? And I think that's really the heart of what we're both saying, is that we want to maintain as much movement choice and as many movement solutions as we can. And this idea of mobility and joint health really can be agnostic from exercise. Exercise can be a wonderful way to maintain and support and nurture and load. And I think everyone on this call recognizes we probably should breathe hard, and we probably should pick up something heavy, and we probably should be engaged in activities like meaningful relationships and eating whole foods and drinking water. But what we know is, even if don't fancy yourself an exerciser, there are practices, and this is some aspect of your health, like brushing your teeth or flossing, that we really want to keep an eye on. Because what you'll find, for example, is that when the ankle gets stiff, your ability to maintain your center of balance, your center of mass over your foot decreases, and that means your fall risk goes up. So suddenly we start to see these perturbations happen when we start to lose access to these ranges. And because the body is such a wonderful adaptation machine, we can continue to function at pretty high levels, but all of a sudden I can't put my arms over my head. All of a sudden I can't twist and grab the seatbelt. And those are those kind of pre-cues that we're like, hey, something's going on. So how do we put joint health back into the mix in the conversation of performance and health and longevity?
Yeah, and I just add one more thing. Our goal is to have a body that can say yes to adventure. That's our goal. And so mobility is a key part of that. We want to make sure that we maintain it so that, we can keep doing the things we love, because everybody has movement goals, and they can be, from anywhere from just wanting to keep up with your grandkids at Disneyland in your 70s to, wanting to go skiing in Greenland. Everybody has movement goals and movement, ideas for what they want to be doing going forward. And, mobility is one way to sort of have a body that can say yes to adventure.
And the last thing I'll say is the real magic here is asking when and where and how do I keep an eye on this? Because I think people are like, yeah, I'd like to feel better and be able to move better, more freely. When do I put this into the system? So we'll get to that today.
Yeah. Wow, there was a lot there to unpack. Great information. Just sort of going back to the narrowing of the hallway, and both of you touched on this, the progression that happens with age. So for the science nerds out there, and I think you're preaching to the choir about the mobility and adventurous life for me and everyone out there, but for those who are interested, like what are the main joint components, and why does that happen to us? Why over our lifespan do we get kind of creaky and achy if we're not paying attention to this and working on a lot of the movements that you're going to be talking about?
I think I'll take a swing.
Yeah.
The first order of magnitude business is to just appreciate that we don't have to lose our range of motion. Can you imagine an organism in 2.5 million years of evolution that just gets so stiff that it can't bend its arms and feed itself? Like you're like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But what we do see is very much sort of a sister to Wolff's law of use it or lose it. That the brain is real good at pairing off features and aspects of the physiology that just aren't being called on for adaptation. And so one of the issues is that if we might hear these old tropes like motion is lotion or move it or lose it. But the idea here is, first and foremost, that if we start with the idea that you don't have to become stiff and creaky and lose your range, which I want to just be clear about that, but that our bodies are constantly adapting to the food we have, the plays, the movement, the choices. And so ultimately, yes, we do see that healing may slow down as we age. We may not have I like to say that when I was 17, you could cut my hand off and it would grow back in the morning, and then we'd go on with daily work. If you get a cut in your 60s or 70s and 80s, you still miraculously heal. I don't know how that happens, but it does. We see lots of surgeries and people heal and get their lives back. So the healing adaptation response, our ability to adapt to tissue stress and tissue trauma, may attenuate a little bit, but it never goes away. So one of the things that happens, I think, is that when we're younger, we have a lot more tolerance in the system to not eat nutritious foods. Our gonads are working really hard. We have all of this amazing cocktail that allows us to adapt more effectively. And then as that adaptation attenuates a little bit, and we may not move as much, or our environment doesn't call on us to move as much, what ends up happening is that we can potentially be stiff because our tissues are not being asked to accommodate or adapt. The same way we might think about the joint as your quads. If you're not calling on your quads to be powerful and strong, your quads will become their lowest form selves. What we might think about the joint, and I think it's useful as a physio, I think about this all the time. We are always interested in what aspect of the movement system are we trying to influence. And so we can't really talk about the joints without talking about the environment that you're in. We can't talk about it without saying, hey, there are techniques that transfer to better power. But then also we might say, is this a joint capsule problem? Do we think that the restriction in my ability to move a hip is soft tissue? Is it the fascia and the connective tissue system? Is it the musculature that's guarding or it's become stiff? Or is it just good old fashioned that bag of fibrocartilage around that's kind of creating an environment and creating integrity in the joint? And oftentimes what we don't appreciate is that, yeah, I might do some foam rolling, but if I'm not asking that joint to be in some of these end range positions, if I'm not asking it to load and putting it under sort of the torsion strain, the rotation necessary, then those joints themselves can become a little stiff, but they're also influenced by the whole system. So if we're going to improve range, we want to look at ourselves through a systems approach, which everyone on this call can certainly appreciate.
I think the only thing that I would add here is that we are so influenced by our environments, and our modern environments are not set up for us to ask our joints to touch all their native ranges of motion all the time. We are sitting a lot. You'll see that Kelly and I are taking this webinar sitting on the floor, which is something we'll talk about later in one of our favorite recommendations. But, you know, there is really good data to show that in cultures where people sit on the floor, toilet on the floor, sleep on the floor, you know, are getting down, getting up and down off the floor more often, have much less creakiness, stiffness, the fall risk in the elderly drops. There are fewer joint replacements,
less lumbar
injuries. So I think, you know, we really are in our Western culture very influenced by our environment. And one of our mentors is a woman named Katie Bowman, and she describes, you know, thinking about movement as a diet, and that, you know, really you want to have, just in the same way that you want to have, like, eat the rainbow, you want to eat a diverse amount of fruits and vegetables, you want to think about movement in the same way. And most of us have a very small movement diet. You know, we get up, we get into the car, we drive to work, we sit, maybe we do a little workout, and then we sit some more watching Netflix at night. And our movement diet is very small. And I love that idea of thinking about it as a movement diet. We really want to expand our movement diet so that we are actually putting all of our joints into their native ranges of motion and really sort of like eating the rainbow of movement, so to speak.
And what's nice about that is suddenly if you take that idea of, hey, what's possible with my body and am I touching those shapes? A practice like yoga makes a lot of sense all of a sudden, right? That it's not about achieving contortionist level abilities. I don't want to compete with the 19-year-old kids in the class, but I do see that I'm starting to create a practice where I'm exposing myself to fundamental shapes. And ultimately, there's really two ways that we love getting the brain to care about positions. And number one is that we go slower. So if we slow down, we can really, that's how we teach techniques. That's how we teach sort of new skills. And so we have a chance to get the brain to pay attention for us to feel. So we can always slow down. And the number two is something called isometrics. When we pause in a position, either resist something that can't be resisted, or we lower and perform what we call a yielding isometric, just like I'm squatting and I pause. The brain pays attention to those, and joints and tissues and tendons and ligaments love those things. And what's nice about practices like Pilates and yoga is suddenly we're going slow, so I have a chance to safely, pain-free way signal that this is a safe position to be in, and I'm forced to spend a whole bunch of time in downward dog having to breathe, and all of a sudden the brain is saying, hey, it's safe to breathe here, I'm spending time here, this must be a position that's important for this organism, and that shape and all of the sort of features of having better cartilage, having better joint capsules, having sort of better access to those ranges through your connective tissue muscle system, they all come together in symphony. And so ultimately, as Juliet said, what we're looking for, what are the practices? A modern strength and conditioning practice touches those things. A modern Pilates practice. And notice that these things might be agnostic from going to the Olympics, but we're still looking at these things as we go to the Olympics. But ultimately, we're adapting, and our bodies are adapting to our environment. And if you don't take your hip into extension a lot, you're going to find that it's real hard to stand up and be powerful.
Ellie was just waiting for his chance to talk about hip extension, Ann.
I know. I'm going to ask him about that a little later. I'm sure you're going to do it in the exercises as well.
Yes.
So I saw a lot of hearts going up the screen. So you've convinced a lot of people, or a lot of people agree with you. But there are people out there who I'm sure are watching this and they're like, okay, I am going to, I'm on board. I'm going to do this mobility stuff, but they have real joint pain. So I think, part of the answer might be what you said about going slowly. But first of all, how do you work around that? And how do people know whether they can just push through that pain or whether they need to see, a professional first, or what's the distinction there they can make?
Isn't that great that, we have programmed ourselves to be so sophisticated in so many aspects of our life, but when something hurts, we don't have a good relationship with that. And so first and foremost, I want everyone here, unless we are in chronic and persistent pain, I want us to think differently a little bit about pain, and that we're going to start by saying pain is a request for change. It's one of the mechanisms by which our brains, our nervous systems are saying, hey, let's pay attention to that. And there are areas of our body that don't have as much rich sensory motor information. Your hands, your feet, your face. We have a lot of processing in the homunculus in the brain that allows us to sort of make sense of what's going on. But then we have some areas of our body, like our spines, that don't have quite as much sensory motor information. So the brain is making a lot of guesses about what's happening. So oftentimes we can feel and catastrophize when something hurts. And so it's useful to have a common kind of set of parameters here. Number one is we want people to understand that pain is part of this human experience, and that my resting experience should honestly be pain-free. But if you've ever used your body to do something fun or extraordinary or crash, chances are it's really a part of the common experience. And so first of all is that when that check engine light comes on, we can ask ourselves, what's going on with that? And I just want to set this up for a minute, because when we just say pain, no pain, we have that sort of, it's a false dichotomy. It's a dyad that really doesn't serve us very well, because I can give you plenty of bourbon and take away your pain. So ultimately, if we don't begin a conversation about how do I restore, how do I feel better, people will always default to how do I self-soothe? And we can self-soothe with ibuprofen, and we can self-soothe with, whatever is around with us. But ultimately, when we start to think about pain, we should divide it into, number one, do I have a clear mechanism of injury? I fell off my bike. I should probably get an x-ray. That's a great reason to go talk to a healthcare professional. Clear mechanism of injury. I heard a pop. There's a bone sticking out of my thigh right now. Great. It's very clear we need to get help. Number two, we have pathology going on. I have night sweats, dizziness, fever, vomiting, nausea. Something doesn't feel right. Looks like I have an infection in my knee. Great. Let's go get some help and not be unequivocal about why we're doing that. And the third reason that we're going to go activate the emergency medical system is that I cannot occupy my role in my family. I can't occupy my role in the team. I can't occupy my role in society. So if your back hurts so bad that you can't go to work, that's a medical emergency. If you can't walk around and pick up your kids, or hey, that's a medical emergency. So that's really nice for us to be able to say immediately, boom, let's go get some help. Again, mechanism of injury, pathology, can't occupy my role in society. As we were talking about, using this body to do the things that matter to me and my family and household. On the other side, we're going to call it incident, which means that, hey, it's real. I know your knee hurts after that big run, but let's see if there's some aspect of the system that we might be able to influence. And I think when we start to say, hey, I can still move, I can still occupy my role, I can do these things. This is no different than looking at nutrition or looking at sleep or looking at strength or range of motion. And we have some tools that can help us sort of work through the problem a little bit, but most people haven't been given those. So that's a first start. Hey, again, do I think this is serious enough I should activate the EMS system? And of course, if you have a wonderful physio, go see her. If you have a relationship with your physician wants to see you for low-level problems, not when you're on fire. So if you're like, hey, can I just get your 5 minutes of advice? It's always okay to talk to a healthcare professional, but understand that dichotomy for us is when we're saying, hey, it's okay, But let's go ahead and empower you through a set of tools. Do you want to talk about how sort of some of the environment pieces that affect pain?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can even have a conversation about pain without talking about all of these lifestyle pieces. And I would put sleep at the very tippy top of that. We have people come in and see us in our physical therapy clinic and have for years. People would think the first thing that, Kelly would do or one of our physical therapists would do would be like a physical assessment. And often what they're doing instead is asking, how much are you sleeping? What's your stress level like? Are you eating any fruits and vegetables? Are you getting enough movement? What's your movement diet like? All of these sort of lifestyle questions often have such a big influence in either how much pain we feel or at least how our brain is perceiving pain. To Kelly's point, and I just want to give a real world example, we run a strength and conditioning program, lifestyle program. Most of the people in our program are between 40 and 70. And, pain is part of the experience. And I'm not talking about injury kind of pain. I'm just saying, oh, I did this workout and, my trap is a little bit bothering me or my lat or something's going on. My knee feels stiff. This is sort of a common part of the experience. And the only way to avoid that is to, give up and lay in your lazy boy, which of course has a whole host of other terrible problems that we don't want. So if we're going to be moving our bodies, we may feel a bit of soreness and a bit of pain. And so much for us is about reframing that, making sure you know when to call upon the medical system and when to say, hey, actually, I might be able to spend 10 minutes doing some soft tissue work on my calves and quads to free up some space in my stiff knee and get a really good night's sleep. And I might wake up tomorrow and have my knee not hurt.
Yeah. We're going to have to transition in just a moment, or we get to transition in just a moment to the movement exercises. But what you just touched on about loosening up your quad or your calf or something to actually relieve the knee pain just reminds me of a line from your Built to Move book, which was, the place the rats get in is not where they chew, which first of all, yuck. And second, I think that's really telling about your whole message that a lot of times where you think it hurts is not where the problem is. And
That's right.
it's challenging to identify then, well, what should I work on? And I think that's a good transition point to say, you're going to show people what to work on to present, if you have knee pain, maybe it's in your hip flexion or something like that. So I am going to turn my camera off so that you will go to full screen on people's screen. And then I will pop back on after the exercises. I will be doing the exercises. I'm wearing sweatpants because, this is Zoom, so you can wear whatever you want. And I will also be looking through the Q&A. So for those of you who have questions, put them in there, and then I will have them when we come back together. So
fantastic. We're going to switch lenses so that we can pan back out. But I'm just going to continue. Go ahead, Mike. We're going to do two things, everyone. As I'm just going to keep talking here. 1 second. Bear with us. One of the things that we're going to make sure that we're discussing is that there is a lot that we can do to feel better in our bodies. And when something is tweaky or something doesn't feel good, oftentimes what we want to do is have a simple sort of rubric to run through to make sure that we're not missing something. So if number one is the first video we ever made around you taking care of yourself or feeling better, was something we called the 10-minute squat test, which was just saying, hey, this is a position we value and a fundamental shape that puts a lot of pieces of the body together, the hips, the knees, the ankles, what is normative? And even if it's not normative, I better be spending some time in these positions. And so the first order of business, if I'm trying to improve my range of motion, is to spend time in that range of motion. And so you'll notice that Juliet and I have been sitting on the ground for the last 20 or 30 minutes. And your first piece of homework tonight is going to be to sit on the floor in front of your couch for 20 to 30 minutes. And we want this to actually become one of the aspects of your movement health behavior. And
your movement diet.
And whenever we can start to stack behaviors and have multiple outcomes, we're really big fans of that. So What happens when we sit on the ground is that you're going to see that, hey, there's going to be a shape that suddenly becomes tiresome or irksome, and you're going to need to fidget. And what we're going to begin to do when we start to sit in some of these positions for these times is that we're going to begin to load the connective tissue. We're going to begin to spend considerable amount of time at these end ranges. There's no wrong way or right way to be able to do some of these things, but ultimately, we want you to be able to start to accumulate some significant end ranges of motion. In this position, Juliet's knees are bending more than they would throughout an entire day of work.
Right, sitting
at the desk, right? Sort of stuck in these 90 degrees. So again, sitting in a chair is not dangerous of itself at all. It's only that if my body starts to lose function or starts to lose capacity because I'm adapting to these environments, that's where we start to say, hey, let's become curious about the seating. So first and foremost, we're going to sit on the ground.
And if I could just add, a lot of people say, well, what should I be doing? And Kelly did touch on, and we've shown you already a few of the positions. But what we found is that you're just naturally going to want to shift positions over a 30-minute period. You're going to say, okay, I'm tired of sitting cross-legged. I'm going to move to 90-90. I'm going to long sit with my feet in front of me. There's no right or wrong way to sit on the floor. And in fact, the more different positions you can adopt during that 30-minute period, the better, because as I said earlier, it's just one of the ways where you can expand your movement diet. And one of the most almost simple, it's not completely passive, but compared to a more formal mobility practice, feels pretty passive and is something you can do while you're watching TV, or if you're lucky enough to work from home, you can sit on the floor while you're working on your laptop. There's just a lot of ways that you can incorporate this into a busy life without having to feel like you have to add on a whole mobility practice.
And let me say that if you need a chair to lean against, you need to sit on a pillow to elevate a little bit, make that comfortable initially, that's okay. We're talking about exposure to fundamental positions that will continue to happen for decades and decades. So sitting on the ground initially might be very uncomfortable, but also you're going to find that your ability to get up and down off the ground is going to improve. The number one reason people end up in assisted living is they can no longer get up and down off the ground independently. And remember how we started this conversation, the first order of business is exposure. So before we jump to the secret squirrel mobility program, which we all want to improve our wattage on the bike, let's make sure that we're just beginning to spend time in these fundamental positions around the hip. So what we can begin to then say is, okay, hey, I'm spending 20 or 30 minutes here. I'm starting to think, and exposure is certainly on the plan. When we are working through a pain-related problem, and that's oftentimes why people begin to see that they're having, hey, I need to pay attention to something because my knee is starting to ache or I'm getting stiff. We can say, hey, is this tissue or this tissue system sensitized? There's something going on, and how can I easily desensitize it? And what you'll see is that there are a whole lot of tools out there: scraping, cupping, maybe using percussion, vibration, massage. Those are all techniques where I might get the brain to say, hey, this knee is not actually a problem, that I can begin to just signal safe movement, safe loading of the tissues. Number two is that we ask, is this a congested tissue? A congestion might be that I'm just swollen, or I have some old osteoarthritis and my body's a little dramatic when I go for a big hike and now my knee's a little bit swollen. But congested tissues tend to limit range of motion. They tend to limit healing and adaptation, and they're easily mechanisms of sensitization. So that if I have a swollen joint or a swollen tissue system, my brain is going to perceive what's going on with sort of a greater threat level. So when we get people moving more, one of the things that happens is that we oftentimes feel like, hey, I don't have that threat. And one of the reasons that we think walking every day, trying to hit an 8,000 step minimum, is a way of decongesting and get non-threatening input into the system.
Yeah.
And the last one is about blood flow, is that if we're going to be honest about the health and the quality of your tissues, we absolutely need to get blood flow in there. And the best way to do that is through movement. So at the very least, I'm going to continue to walk. And then I might say, oh, hey, this benefits from a little bit of light exercise or light movement, that when I take the garbage out and bring the groceries in, I start to create a healthy environment. And then the last piece is range of motion, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I think we should talk about upstream, downstream, and do some examples with
Can I just
knee
jump in
pain.
here for a second though? And can you guys talk while you're demoing? Because I think people are really eager to see some of the movement.
You got it.
Yep.
You got it. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. First thing we're going to do is we're going to teach you all, show you something we call the hip spin up. And this is a simple technique or simple strategy that allows us to just think about this as almost like a morning sun salutation. So we're going to show a couple positions. My heels are on the ground. Juliet is going to get her toes off the ground, and it's okay to have her heels off the ground and to be using the ground as support. In this position, the ankle is closed down, the knee is closed down, the hip is closed down, and I'm just going to take some breaths here. Juliet's balancing. I could put one knee down. Can you do that, Jay? Come back. Everyone put the other knee down and come back, right? We might be able to reach to the side and take a big breath. We're starting to add safe trunk rotation and flexion. Take a breath. You could reach out in front of you as far as you can, the other side, front of you can. Notice that if I can't get my heels on the ground, that's okay. What's important is that we're taking our joints to their available range. From this position, we'll go ahead and just step back into a big lunge. And what we're going to do here, again, if your lunge looks like this, that's okay. Be in the sort of range that you can have access to. If you can stick that leg behind you a little bit, we'll go ahead and do that. I'll rotate and Juliet can go front. And all we're going to do is here just wobble around. And we're thinking about this front leg. I'll switch legs here. And all we're thinking about is, hey, this hip flexion is an important position. So I'm going to move in and out of range, taking some breaths. I can go ahead and rotate and look over my shoulder, starting to add very complex positions. I can go the other direction and making sure that when I hit a position that I'm like, oh, I haven't been there for a second, take a full breath in. Now, since we're in this position, we're kind of wobbling around here, we're now going to focus on the back leg for a second. All I'm going to do is lift the back leg up off the ground. And now we're focusing a little bit on hip extension. So if I just held this position and wobbled around a little bit, we're getting some significant isometric time here. I'm not moving, but I'm telling my brain this is an important position. So at the very least, let's get 30 seconds in each one of these shapes, making sure that we can breathe. Can I squeeze my butt in this position? Can I flex my quads? I'm teaching myself to own this shape and to be able to have motor control, movement control in positions that might be a little bit difficult. So we're just squeezing the butt, flexing the quad, pressing the hip to the ground. Take a break if you need. If you want to make it harder, point your toe, do the same thing, straighten your legs, squeeze your butt, press the hip to the ground, and you might feel very stiff in the front of the hip. That's okay. What we'll do here is we'll switch legs. And one of the things that we do is we like to say, hey, if I have 10 minutes in the morning, can I floss my joints? Can I touch some of these end ranges? So the three practices that we tend to give our teams and athletes are to do the hip spin up, which is what this is. Again, we're just wiggling around. Maybe I do this in the morning, having my cup of coffee before I leave the house. Did you want to add something, Jay?
Well, no, I was just going to say that's when we do this. Like we do this when we have coffee in the morning, or if we're going to exercise in the morning, we'll do this at home before we go, or actually at the very beginning of our workout if we're feeling stiff before we get our actual workout in.
The first idea, we're focusing on the front leg after we've been in that bilateral. Now it's easier for me to get into a deeper position. If you're looking for advancement, go ahead and put your elbows to the ground if you got it. That's okay. I can twist away, knee goes one direction, hand goes the other direction, taking a big breath. I'm not going to hurt myself. Respect, if you can't breathe in a position, you don't own that position. So we're wiggling around. If I didn't get a chance to work out today, I would still have moved my body through ranges, which is important. Back leg up, squeeze your butt, flex your quads, press the hip to the ground, make sure that you're breathing. Let's hold that. Let's shift to back leg. And we'll just hold this for, again, trying to get 20 to 30 seconds. Notice that I'm moving and wiggling and just being curious about all of the shapes available to me in this range. And what you saw was Juliet twisted to the side because that felt good on this lateral seam, tied her hip into her rib cage. You can modify and minimize any of these shapes that are available to you. Then We're going to come back to the other leg forward, and we're going to do something called hamstring flossing. We're just going to say it's safe to our nervous system. I'm going to flex my quad and straighten my leg. So we're just going to touch this end range, and we're going to pull the foot back if I've got it. That's a position of high tension in the nervous system. So if that doesn't feel good, leave the toe pointed. But what I'm interested in is finding a position where there's tension in the back of my leg, and I can still activate and grab my quadriceps. And I'm just going to do this 5 times, 10 times, whatever feels good, however much time I have. We should be able to get all of this done within 10 minutes. If I want to make it really spicy, foot comes back, head comes down too. I touch that shape and come out of it. Let's switch legs, a little bit of hamstring, flossing, and notice that some of us might have to come really tall to get that. That's okay. The idea is to work in our current available range and not value that as good or bad, but hey, I'm real stiff today. I did a big workout yesterday. I did a big walk yesterday. I've been on the airplane a lot. How do I begin to just restore these sliding surfaces? Last thing we'll do is just get down and kick the leg out to the side. So I'm going to be up on my toe here using my hands. If I can sit upright, ultimately that's my goal. But Juliet's got her foot straight, and so we're just thinking about this leg. That's where we're feeling it. And then we're going to shift as low as we can, and we're going to sit down on the other leg. Again, this might be very high. This might be my range where I'm just going from hands on the ground or hands on my knees, moving to my available range. And as that range changes, maybe I get lower and lower. What we'll do is we'll come back to that first position and just see how we're feeling again. And oftentimes we see that if we're going to make our backs feel better, we need to work on the big primary engines. The spine is an engine of itself, but the big primary engines of the lower body is the hips. So one of the things that we assign for anyone who has any hip pain, low back pain, knee pain, is we say, hey, let's make sure that we're taking the whole system to some of its available end ranges and spend a little time wiggling around there and doing some breathing there. And it's a way of restoring function back to the system. Anne?
Yeah, can I interject here? So we're getting some comments that these moves are very advanced for people. So can you also provide sort of modified versions of them for people who are just starting out and that they're already feeling discomfort in some of their joints?
Yes. So first and foremost, it's okay to feel some discomfort. Make sure you can take a breath there. That I'm going to give you permission. And remember that if I was struggling to be in some of these shapes, maybe there's a pillow under my knee, and maybe Juliet's got a pillow under her knee right now. Even in this tall range, and maybe it's just moving forward a little bit, getting this knee behind my butt, and then I'm just going to wiggle back and forth. Maybe I'm holding onto something or, squatting using my hands to my available range, and I'm just going to continue to move in some of these shapes. If I needed to completely take gravity out of it, I could even do something that looked like pulling my knee to my chest for some end ranges, straightening the leg to end ranges. But what you're beginning to see is these shapes are not miraculous. All I'm doing is showing normative range of motion. And because in our strength and conditioning world, we haven't prioritized range, we prioritize capacity and watts and output. Strength. These things can be shocking. And what's amazing is that even if I'm doing my best to sit on the ground and this is as much as I can sit, or I'm sitting and this is as much as I can sit, beginning a conversation of spending some time wiggling around in these fundamental shapes will begin to restore. You may be sore after this because we're beginning to tell the body we need to adapt and have some changes in the connective tissue systems that allow for normal range. And again, let me just reiterate that if we're not regularly touching these positions and shapes, those joints are going to become stiff, and restoring that can be a great way to make ourselves feel better. So the next thing we're going to do is show you our shoulder spin up, and everyone should be able to do this. We're going to do it standing. So we're going to come up and get into a standing position. We tip that camera up a little bit, Lux. Very simple. We're going to do 10 swings in each direction. So the first thing we're going to do is just lift the arm up over our head, get as tall as you can, and we're going to spin the hand backwards here. And the goal is to go nice and slow and make the biggest arc you can with that arm. So I'm going to just spin that arm, making the biggest range that's available to me. Shoulder blade comes up. Maybe I'm off on the other foot, so I can get this hand as tall as I can, right up by my ear. Notice my face is soft as I go around. And I'm just going to add this rotation, palm facing until I can't take it anymore. That paw goes in scoop of travel. Again, we like 10 of these. And I want to show you something, that I'm not being a robot, that I'm rotating and side bending, and I'm trying to tie my shoulders into my trunk, into my arms, so that there's a lot of motion. And what we say to our athletes is, make it weird. Let's make it weird. How can I begin to explore sort of the room with my range? Then we're going to go forward, same arm, but this time we're going to try to get that shoulder blade off the body. So we're going to scoop, palm is in direction of travel. When I need to rotate, I'm going over. And what you're thinking to yourself, what's going on here? Well, we're straightening the arm. We call that long lever. But these are fundamental shapes for walking. If I'm walking or running, I'm going to need to get my arm behind my body. If I need to reach into the back of the seat, if I need to push off, that's what we're really highlighting here, is having access to the shoulder extension. And oftentimes we start to get real stiff, and that's going to make it tough if I need to do a push-up or chaturanga or get off the ground or ride my mountain bike. So 10 in each direction. Really exaggerate that hand coming forward each time. And then let's switch sides. We're going to go palm backwards, big swoop. Again, opening, moving as slow as you can. And if you see that you're making a shave off of that circle, then spend a second being in as close to arm up by my ear, which is full normative end range flexion of the shoulder. Reach behind nice and slow. Even if I've got an old labral issue, I can go slow through there, teach my brain that, hey, I might not be able to hand speed, but position is going to be okay here. I'm starting to tie that shoulder blade in. We'll go the other direction, which means that if that shoulder blade has a better relationship with the torso, then the arm is going to have a better relationship with the shoulder blade, and I start to restore a ton of function here. So just touching those shapes, trying to make big arm wheels. If I wanted to, I could even watch the hand and start to tie in some neurovestibular work. I can make my head turn and have to chase. That can be very useful, tying in the whole system. Okay, forward and back for 10. Next one we're going to do is we're going to start to add some rotation. So ultimately, we're going to pretend like this is a shoulder motion. But those of you who are familiar with Qigong or Tai Chi, you're like, oh, yeah, I get this. I'm going to plant that foot on the bottom to the side I'm rotating to. And what I'm really doing is asking for a whole bunch of rotation of the hip as it relates to the trunk. So we're just going to move back and forth. If I want to look over my head and see how far I can reach, I can. I can just do one side at a time so I don't get too dizzy. I can also keep my eyes on something in the back and try to rotate off them. So I'm going to be pulling that head, which drags my eyes off rotation. And now I'm starting to tie in a whole bunch of new side motion in there.
We do that like how many times?
10 times. And then we're going to start to add a little bit of rotation in, where I'm going to try to get my hand up my back. What we're working on here is having this is the athlete scratch test, but I'm really trying to work on this internal rotation of the shoulder. I'm thinking about how the shoulder is rotating, and this is me putting my bra on. So let's see if we can get that hand up the back. And if you start to feel good, start to add some speed. And can I get some motion? I'm reaching across and telling my brain it's safe to reach across where a lot of people have pain. What's nice about these activities is they're immediately self-limiting. So if you start to feel ugly or you have a bad spot, go a little slower, take a breath there. Otherwise, let's go ahead and remind ourselves that speed is something that humans do. We're now going to swoop side to side. And what we're really doing is working on side bending. Again, this is just called the shoulder spin up. If you want to be very complex, I start to bend my hand at the top. This is, again, another position of high neural tension. I'm swooping between two planes of glass, and I'm going to shift and push my hips over as far as I can one direction or the other direction, and just see if I can open up. If this is what it looks like right now, that's okay, because really what you're seeing is that we're working on your golf game here. So a little bit of swoop side to side, push that hip, be as a big banana bow. Those of you who do yoga, you'll recognize what this is. And lastly, we're just going to take those. We have two more. We're going to take the thumbs. We can spread, flex, and we're just going to add some motion in. I'm getting that double shoulder extension. I'm making those nerves run through their nerve tunnels. I'm spreading my hands out. I could add flexion in if I wanted to. Dropping my chin. I could look up if I wanted to, just to get tied the neck in as you want. And lastly, we would be remiss if we didn't do some Michael Phelpsing. So just your Olympic swimmer on the blocks, getting ready to go. But what we love this is I'm going to spread my fingers out and get as much finger spread as I can. And as my hands come in, I'm going to take them into these gross flexion patterns. So I'm just flexing and extending. Again, 10. If I have 8 minutes, I'm going to do 8 minutes worth of this. If I have 10 minutes, I'm going to do 10 minutes of this. And what you'll find now is suddenly that rotator cuff has a ton of blood in it. I feel prepped. I told my brain this is important. I did some motion and some movement. And even if I don't get a chance to exercise today, what we just did was some very complex end range motion, sort of exposing the shoulder and the shoulder blade and the trunk to all of the fundamental positions that allow me to reconstitute any fundamental movement. Awesome. What we'd love to do now is show you real quickly how we think about desensitizing with simple pain techniques. And the first one, do we have a roller? Do you want to use a roller?
I can grab one.
If you have a roller and a ball, a lacrosse can, a baseball, you don't need any special equipment. But what we'll do here is I'll talk Juliet through, just grab that, Juliet, and I'll talk you through it. We like everyone to have some kind of roller and some kind of ball on the floor while they're watching TV. Because if you're already doing your 20 or 30 minutes, one of the things that we can do is say, hey, I might as well grab a soft tissue roller. Now, the key here is that we have found that 10 minutes of soft tissue mobilization in the evening can be very, very useful for a couple reasons. Clinically, it allows us to get good adherence. So we find that most people have 10 minutes. Number two is that there's nothing really going on to compete. And at the end of the day, you're actually free to ask yourself, what's sore? What hurts? What did I use? And that gives us a little bit of context for some of this soft tissue mobilization. And lastly, if you've ever had a massage, no one stands up after the massage and thinks to themselves, let's go ahead and get into a fight. So this is a really great way to access some of the parasympathetic aspects of our body. So here's what we're gonna do.
I was just gonna suggest, I feel like maybe we can do this in terms of like, I'm in my living room floor, I've got some knee pain. How do I think about upstream, downstream?
Yeah.
Like because I think the upstream, downstream concept is so important. So I think we should go through that and then show you, like, I'm home, I have knee pain, what would I do?
So what Juliet is hinting at is, first of all, we've taken your joints through a big range of motion practice already. We did the hip spin up, we've done the shoulder spin up, we've got some movement in there, we're walking throughout the day. But let's say that I pop some sort of discomfort around my knee. It may not be rabies, may not be, could be, but probably not rabies of the knee. So what we're going to do is drop into a simple system or idea of thinking, what is upstream of the knee? What is downstream of the knee? So what's upstream of the knee?
And this is where the rats get in, they don't always chew idea.
That's right. And what Juliet's reminding us is where we think it is, it ain't. Yeah. And what's interesting is that oftentimes we'll perseverate on joint health, joint structures, but we're not looking at how is that joint as a part of the system's whole. So if I can influence the range of motion, the freeness of the motion or movement of the tissue system, oftentimes I'll pick up improved joint function in the background. So here Juliet's going to have a roller. We're just going to start on her calf for everyone can relate to this. Now, one of the things that we're thinking of is, Kelly, can stiffness in the calf drive knee pain? 100%. And if we thought down, if I had some heel pain or Achilles tendinopathy or pain in the bottom of the foot, part of our prescriptive soft tissue mobilization is to work upstream of the foot. Now, what Juliet is doing is, notice that she's not rolling classically front and back. What we find is that this ends up being largely a waste of time for a lot of people. What she's doing is rolling side to side. And what I will point out is that she may need additional load on top of that to be able to access sort of deep tissues, or find if she needs a little bit more pressure, we can overpressure that. We like to go side to side because we're really interested in how the calf is articulating with the system neighborhood. What's going on with the deeper flexors? What's going on with the peroneals? How's the gastroc interacting with the soleus? And if we sort of work side to side, this gives Juliet a chance to systematically work through layer by layer and depth by depth. If she finds something that's uncomfortable, we pause. If it feels ropey and fibrotic, we pause. If it feels sensitive to compression, we pause. And what we're going to do is we're going to stop when we feel something ugly, and we're going to take a big breath in, 5-second inhale, safe to move. She's going to flex and contract on the roller for 5 seconds. That's an isometric. That's saying it's safe to move. Then she's going to relax and repeat that. Here's the deal. We have a couple rules to protect you from soft tissue work. This is really hurting. Am I hurting myself? No. Number one, I always have to be able to take a breath. If I'm on a tissue that's so sensitized to compression that it's uncomfortable and I've stopped breathing, we're exceeding your nervous system's ability to tolerate that. So go lighter. Be nice to yourself. Number two, I have to be able to contract the muscles or the tissue system underneath compression. So in this situation, if Juliet cannot contract her calf, then she's doing too much. We love to roll side to side, and if we find any discomfort to compression, we found an area of the body that can benefit from some soft tissue work, some soft tissue mobilization. There's a lot of things happening here. Number one, Juliet's restoring how the tissue architecture is sliding and gliding. Number two, she's resetting how the brain is interpreting with the resting length and tension of that muscle. Number three, she's getting blood flow in there. She's restoring hydration. She's getting non-threatening input in. If she wanted to, restore function after a big bike ride, what we can do is just make sure that the body still has access to some of these sliding pieces. One of the things you can do down below is something we call a scrub. So instead of rolling side to side, she's just scrubbing that Achilles, that system, that tendon on the roller to make sure that the tissues, again, are sliding. If you feel the back of your hand, the skin should slide over your bones and tendons. And if I have pain in any one of these areas and I have something that's sticky like an exoskeleton, we want to restore that.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add about this upstream, downstream thinking is so powerful, and you will have the happiest physical therapist if you end up in the physical therapy office with shoulder pain or any kind of joint pain, and you come in and say, hey, I mobilize my tissues upstream and downstream. So if my knee is hurting me, I would spend time while I'm watching TV mobilizing my hamstrings, my quads, my calves, maybe even my shins, just to try to address the tissues upstream and downstream of my knee. But you can take the same principle and apply it to your shoulder or your elbow or your wrist or your ankle, any one of your joints. And you'd be shocked how many people are able to sort of make a huge difference in their experience of pain in various joints by just taking this upstream, downstream approach. It's really effective. And, then if you spend a bunch of time working on your upstream, downstream, and you still can't make any difference, that's when you can go and seek professional help.
Normal tissues are painless to compression. Let me just say that again. Normal tissues can handle very large loads of tension. So none of us may be feeling ugliness here. And I want to show you something that if Juliet and I were having a romantic, we just had our anniversary, and if I was wanting to spend time with Juliet, I might even use my shin as a roller. And that's a little bit bonier, true? Yeah. And are you feeling any discomfort?
I mean, a little bit, like
a little bit.
2 out of 10.
Only because you're on TV, right? It's performative.
2 out of 10.
2 out of 10, okay. But what I do want to show you is that if you take this roller and put it on your quadriceps, let's get you on your stomach, Jay. I'll let you demonstrate this and not me because I know what my quads would be like. What she's going to do is just find a position right in the middle of the thigh. We don't have to cover an entire tissue system, but we are going to spend 5 minutes on this. So if I have knee pain, I want you to roll on that quadriceps thigh system side to side for 5 minutes. J-Star, are you enjoying this?
I mean, it actually does feel pretty good.
Okay, so she's gotten to a place in her life after 20 years of mobility work where this doesn't feel terrible. Now, what's happening? She's rolling side to side. She's exploring the range, going slowly.
Contracting and relaxing.
She's been contracting. She felt something that felt stiff or felt a little sensitized to pressure. And then if that feels good, let's move to a different area. See if you can find an area that feels less pretty side to side. And
yeah, we're getting a lot of questions on, actually it's kind of time for Q&A, but just to chime in here. So a lot of these movements look amazing. People are asking kind of when they should do them, and are they sort of pre-event? We've heard that, stretching before an event can actually drop power and things like that. So when should people be thinking about these?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the hip spin up and shoulder spin up, as we said, for us, those are like morning practices we do while we're having our coffee before we go exercise. Or sometimes I will do the hip spin up before I work out in the gym because I know that I'm going to be doing some kind of movement like a deadlift where I'm going to need to access to my hip range of motion. But the thing that drives Kelly and I crazy is when we walk into a gym and we see a lot of people sitting on the ground getting ready for their workout and they're sort of passively foam rolling their tissues. We do not think that that is a good use of a warm-up time at all. The goal in a warm-up or pre-event is to get like as hot, as sweaty as you can and really actually get warm and warm up your tissues. And certainly a little bit of work on your range of motion if you're trying to access a specific position or feel stiff is okay. But we are not fans of, going into the gym or laying around on the ground before a big event where you need to perform. In those moments, we really recommend like doing whatever you can to get hot and sweaty and get your tissues warm.
We can steal something from our boxers and our fighters. They say if you go to the ring cold, you'll come out cold. And the idea here is that if you start to think, hey, I'm about to go for a bike ride, that's a fight. I'm about to get into a fight. What would I want to do with my body to get ready for a fight? It would look like jump roping. It would look like I'd be hot and sweaty. I'd be touching some fundamental ranges. I'd be playing. I'd be exploring range. Right? What I wouldn't do is lay on the ground and just put some pressure into a tissue and hope that that was preparing me for a fight. And that's what we're starting to see best practices come. The caveat here is that if something hurts before you begin to exercise, we want to get through a warm-up and then assess, hey, that knee is still bugging me. Spending 3 to 5 minutes working on a specific tissue system to desensitize it, a couple minutes on a roller doing some contract, relax, does that make me feel better so it opens up my window of motion to move? We like to spend all of the evening working on the soft tissue. That really does help protect our sort of range of, or protect our time in the gym, that precious time in the gym. So let's go ahead and get moving, get hot and sweaty. I'd rather you spend 10 minutes on the bike doing bike intervals and breath work and something that looked like a flow kind of movement to get prepared. Save the soft tissue work for the evening. And to Juliet's point, if we can get people moving a little bit in the morning, then it turns out it's easier to get into that exercise later on. I don't have to sort of go from stiff self in the morning to sitting in the car, sitting at the desk, and then trying to get the whole thing moving before I exercise. If I begin to have a movement practice in the morning, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then what ends up happening is it's easier for me to touch some of those shapes and positions later on.
Great. I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted your flow there. Was there something else critical?
No, I think we're good. Let's do questions if there are some.
10 minutes of soft tissue work. There's so much good advice out there. You don't have to be precious. Keep it the simple rules. should be painless to compression. If it's painful, that's okay. You're not going to damage yourself. Make sure that you can breathe and that you can contract, explore, begin to look for blind spots, and lo and behold, you'll find that you'll sleep better, and tomorrow you'll feel even better.
Yeah, and I would just add to that to embrace the upstream, downstream thinking if you have a little bit of joint pain, because there's a lot of ways that you can improve that and feed slack to the system by some upstream, downstream soft tissue work.
And for you clinicians, we call that complex regional interdependency, right? Where that turns out my shoulder's attached to my body, and if I get my shoulder moving better, aspects of my movement system improve.
Someone actually asked, what's upstream and downstream of the shoulder?
Well, in this situation, you might recognize that upstream might be the traps. Upstream might be the sort of rear of the shoulder. We have a lacrosse ball here. Let me just show what happened to our lacrosse ball. There it is. Let me show you something. I'm going to have Juliet lay on her side. So face this direction, Jay.
Face that way?
Well, I just want your back to the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So she's going to put this ball just underneath her shoulder blade, between her shoulder blade and her body and her spine. And then she can bridge her butt up, take some breaths. She could put that arm over her head, restore some motion there. And if you roll onto your side, I would still consider this upstream. Go and roll on your side again to a front rack position. So now with the ball, it's just going to be rear shoulder, rear deltoid area, just back in this posterior cuff relationship between shoulder blade and arm. And then she's just going to externally rotate this hand to the ground, adding in some rotation. And all she's doing here is saying, hey, all of this is aspects of function of the shoulder. And if I improve some of the aspects of the shoulder by restoring motion, desensitizing, addressing trigger points or stiffness, that can be a really powerful way to restore rotation and ultimately restore how that shoulder is moving. That's a $1 lacrosse ball on a carpet, and with a few motions of just exploring and being curious about what happens here, suddenly you realize I can feel better very quickly.
But I also just want to add, there's, like the lats I would consider to be downstream of my shoulder.
That's right.
Right? Lats, all of these neck muscles, obviously anything in my arm.
Triceps would be upstream, and tricep stiffness can absolutely, be a contributor to pain or dysfunction or limited range of motion. So what we're thinking here is there's some aspect of the tissue system that may have a restriction or may be contributing to my inability or access to that shape. Let's get some input in there so that we can open up a window and start to restore blood flow, range of motion, desensitization, so the brain says it's safe to move again.
Yeah, I have tried that lacrosse thing on my shoulder. And for those of us who spend a lot of time on the computer hunched over, ooh, it hurts so good.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of questions in the chat about specific exercises, and I think I'm going to stay away from those for now, but there's also
Go a little further.
About if you have resources online for people to be able to look at and use for maybe some of the conditions that they have.
Yes. Well, I'll start by saying if anyone is interested in doing the hip spin up or shoulder spin up, we can send a link to both of those, and we have follow along versions of those. So if anybody just wants to wake up with their coffee and do the hip or shoulder spin up with a follow along video, I know Ann and team can make sure that that's available. And we also...
I'll just say there's a third spin up that we do, and that's called the breath spin up. And we're trying to look at the motion of the trunk as the first movement of the spine and getting someone into a regular breath practice where we're beginning to mobilize some of the stiffness of the rib cage, does dramatic differences to how your shoulders and neck move. So hip spin up, shoulder spin up, breath spin up, we'll make those available. And if you just search our name, the ready state, hip spin up, shoulder spin up, breath spin up, those things will come up also.
And then I would just also add that we have an app called Mobility Coach, where you can click on an anatomy guy, based on any kind of like pain or nagging injury you have, and we can give you a bunch of mobilizations and ideas about how to start to address some of that pain.
And I want to just highlight here for a second that we can become very complex in terms of the tissue aspects that we're trying to mobilize or restore normative range to. And we can use bands and techniques and wrap and add and load. As you become more sophisticated in this, we can add to levels of your education sophistication. But starting with how are the tissues articulating, are they just stiff? Yes or no is a really wonderful entree in that everyone can relate to. What we tend to find is that most people who are like, hey, I've got a bad knee, and it turns out their knee they're never in end range or available range, and they do no soft tissue work above or below that joint. There's actually, what we're trying to say is there's a ton you can do to improve how your brain has access to that. And I want to just remind everyone that if you're a human being, and if you were going to be knocked out by a little OA, human beings wouldn't exist. So just keep in mind that if a disc was the end of us all, there would be no human beings, that we're actually very, very resilient creatures, and that we can still have these degenerative changes, but they don't have to be, or age-related changes, but they don't have to be painful.
Actually, that's great that you touched on that, because there are a lot of questions about for people who already had OA, and would these things help or hurt? So can you expand a little more on that?
Yeah, when someone presents with some, let's say general OA, hey, I've got some changes in the joint. Number one is that we really do lean into some of these environmental conditions. Hey, show me that you're getting enough micronutrients and fiber and protein. Show me you're walking and sleeping. And those will be our non-negotiable health. Whether I want to win a world championship, whether I want to win a Super Bowl, or feel good, or have a body that I'm growing with my teenage daughters. We're still having the same conversations with them. So those are pretty normative. And that can be agnostic about how you like to eat, right? You're vegetarian, you're vegan, you have cultural considerations. It doesn't matter. We're going to still make sure that you're getting fruits and vegetables and fiber and micronutrients and enough protein. But then what we can say is, hey, yeah, you may have a joint or a tissue system that doesn't tolerate extreme loading at end range. Great. Well, we can modify some of your ranges. For some of us, if we began a resistance exercise program where we only squatted to a chair height, we would still go to the Olympics. We would still be very strong. We don't necessarily have to change tissue systems. If I'm really stiff, or I've got bony osteophytes, or I've got a labral change, I can still stay in ranges where I can control going slow, pausing, still getting loaded. But part of my range of motion practice might be exposing myself to some of these end ranges, and we'll call them unloaded states. So I've got a fake knee. I have an artificial knee after having a knee replacement, and I've worked real hard to make sure that I can flex this knee back all the way and maintain this range of motion, for example.
Yeah, so just for all the people who are asking, yes, we will send out those links. You will have access to the recording. You have a lot of information. We'll try and put together a little resource packet for you. Okay, we just have a few more minutes, and one more general question. So what about icing when you're feeling sore?
Such a great question. May I take a swing at this?
Oh my God,
Okay.
yes. So, and this is his second favorite topic besides hip extension. So here we go.
So ultimately, understand what our goal in icing is. And our goal in icing is to reduce pain. And so I think that that's a valid strategy. If I'm in a ton of pain, I have a kid who has a boo-boo, I'm going to give her an ice pack. But icing does nothing to actually restore motion, to enhance blood flow. In fact, it can be actually very negative, because I can actually limit some of the healing responses to soft tissue trauma. I can actually have all of that fluid that's been sequestered in lymphatics become porous, reinvest themselves into the interstitial tissues. And I can get so numb that I can have problems. So if we're trying to get numb, that's one thing. Instead, we like active recovery is always better. Can I move? Can I work upstream, downstream? Can I get heat in? Can I get sort of soft tissue mobilization in?
Compression.
Right. And so what we find is that ultimately we're in the habit of saying, hey, we used to not have a whole lot of strategies. So we'd say ice, and you would just sit there and you felt like you were doing something. What we find is that that's not as effective at restoring motion, of getting blood flow, of removing the congestion and waste. We don't want those tissues to become congested. We want those tissues to do its natural thing. And what we might even say is, existentially, is the inflammatory response of your body a mistake? No, it's not. And so ultimately, we're trying to work with the body. And what we found over time is that we have much better outcomes when we hold back on the ice.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of clapping and hearts on that one too. Yeah, so let's see, what else? Is there anything you want to say in conclusion? You have, by the way, you have a whole new group of fans out there. They are loving the demos. They're loving you too. They're wanting the spin ups, and we'll make sure they get all of that information. But do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, the closing remark I would say is that nobody really wants to do a lot of mobility work. And we get that, you know, if you have a little bit of time, and we're the same, if we have a limited amount of time, we want to spend that time exercising or training. And so we've worked really hard to create a system where people can figure out ways to fit these into their normal lives, which is one of the reasons why we are such fans of sitting on the floor for 30 minutes a day, because we know everybody has time to do that in front of the TV or while they're working on their laptop. And, you know, on top of that, we really have seen people make massive changes in their ranges of motion and how they feel in terms of their general stiffness and soreness if they just spend 10 minutes a day doing soft tissue work. It may seem like just one 10-minute session might not do the trick, but if you think about it in the aggregate, 10 minutes a day, even 5 days a week, is 50 minutes a week, and you can put that forward into weeks and months, and it turns out to just be a ton of time spending in, you know, getting some real positive input into your body and just keeping an eye on maintaining that wide hallway of mobility that we talked about at the very beginning of this.
When I was a young physio student, you know, they would say things like, hey, test something you think you changed and something you didn't think you changed. And that kind of blew my mind. And it just turned out, I remember, I was like, actually, I use my shoulder for a bunch of shoulder related things. So what you can actually surprise yourself. For example, if you started doing the soft tissue work on the hips, and then you did that hip spin up, you might actually wake up a few days later and be like, wow, my back feels better. And you don't even have to understand the complexity of how those systems relate and the stabilization mechanisms and the fascial lines. But what you need to remember is that you are a system of systems, and that you're anti-fragile, that you're constantly adapting, and you're robust, and that we are designed to last 100 years. You're going to outlive your gonads for sure, but definitely not outlive your hips and spines. You're designed to move. And what we see, and notice the first thing we said before we put in any complexity was, let's get you moving and let's get you touching some of these shapes. And what we find is that if we have some consistency around that, we can really begin to change our perceptions and even how we've traditionally thought, or sort of the stories we told about our bodies.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. This has been a great session. As I said, you have lots of new fans, was practical information. To those who are watching, you're gonna have access to the recording. We are gonna send resources out, and we will also, with that, send a brief survey to get your input on this interactive format. But from what I can see, with all the little icons going up, I think it was a huge success. So thank you, Juliet and Kelly, and I'll look forward to our continued working together.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming.